I guess you're pretty busy.
We are very busy these days.
Relations are not good.
Relations are deeply troubled, some based upon fact, some based upon fiction.
All right, but what's your understanding of the latest position on the trade talks?
I think we're going to see an extension. I think we may see an agreement with respect to soybeans, corn, machinery. Energy is going to be a big part of that deal, which is going to deal with the bilateral trade deficit that the United States experiences. But I think that's an intellectual fallacy.
Right, but the bilateral deficit's a real thing.
That is going to solve anything.
No,
I mean, bilateral trade deficits are not a measure of anything.
Right, and well, except in the president's mind.
Exactly.
He wants to see a zero-sum game.
Precisely.
In that sense. But
it doesn't make any sense.
But is it likely that, I mean, the Chinese will do the usual trick of offering up more, and we saw that we'll buy $500 billion worth of soybeans between now and eternity. But that doesn't address the sort of IP, the theft of, the requirement for joint ventures, all those sort of issues.
Yes, so I think we're going to see is a pathway towards solving these issues. The Chinese already have a plan which can solve these issues, which is called the program laid out in the third plenum of the 18th Party Congress, which was 6 years ago.
But
they haven't implemented.
They're not doing it.
They are not doing it. So what the Trump administration, what Ambassador Lighthizer, Secretary Ross, Secretary Mnuchin are trying to do is to hold their feet to the fire, to get a commitment to do it and to make sure they do it.
The Chinese know what the U.S. wants.
Yes.
The Chinese know what it's going to take. And if they are so willing to open up and are so in favor of all of this, then why aren't they doing it?
It's incumbent protection. You know, when I was an investor at Carlyle, I used to love kind of monopolies. It was a great thing. You could make more money. You didn't have to work so hard. It was terrific. So those incumbents, those who are benefiting from investment restrictions, those who are benefiting from tariffs, are fighting hard to make sure that these plans are not implemented. And they, because most of them are state-owned enterprises, have a lot of political oomph within the Chinese government.
Let's talk about Huawei, if we may, for the moment. This is a really nasty and difficult one because the US is basically telling its allies, do not buy Huawei's equipment. Huawei's founder said to the BBC only yesterday, I don't care, I will survive anyway. We may have to slow down a bit, but the US can't crush us.
And it sounds like your country and the Germans seem to be agreeing with Huawei, that the British seem to be leaving open a door to buying Huawei 5G equipment. The Germans are certainly opening that door. So there seems to be a split in the alliance.
But this is very dangerous for U.S. China relations, particularly when you start to evolve the rule of law, as you do with the CFO, the daughter, who's on bail in Canada, and you've got Canadians who are locked up in China. I mean, this is a
downward spiral.
That's the phrase I was looking for.
Precisely. It's a downward spiral, and leaders need to break that downward spiral. What I had hoped was as President Trump overflies China on his way to Vietnam at the end of this month, he would stop in China. He's apparently deferred that for some time till late March, when I expect the two leaders will meet and some of these issues will get resolved. The structural issues, you have to remember, the structural issues reform are in the interests of the Chinese people. This is good for the majority. It's bad for the incumbents, but it's good for the majority.
Right, so does Huawei have the potential to blow this thing out of the water?
If it's mishandled by the Chinese government, by the U.S. government, by the Canadian government, it can really be damaging to U.S. China relations and Canadian-China relations. As you noted, they're Canadians. They didn't retaliate against U.S. citizens. Right. They retaliated against Canadian citizens, and holding them is a real bad thing for China.
But here's the problem. The two sides are playing by totally different rules, and I don't just mean different legal systems. Canada is going to have to decide on the extradition on the basis of the rule of law in Canada. There could be no arbitrariness in that sense. The Chinese holding the Canadians might be a very different matter.
Well, clearly, I mean, in the old days with the Russians, we used to have these retaliatory arrests. We're experiencing these retaliatory arrests. I think they are not in the interests of China in the long term. What they're going to do is they're going to have a lot of businessmen from Canada, from the UK, from the US, who are afraid to go to China because they're fearful of being detained. It's a terrible Chinese policy, mind you. This is not one which is, it may be in their short-term interests, it's not in their long-term interests.
Finally, you spend your life looking at these issues. Why should we be optimistic? Why should we be optimistic with a president that is mercurial, with China that's digging itself in, and a really nasty issue?
Because in the
with
long
Huawei?
term, the threats that confront the United States and China are the same. It's climate change, it's terrorism, it's economic policy, it's pandemics. And the people are going to ultimately insist that the governments have a constructive relationship with China. People of the United States and China.
Come back again, sir, and talk more about this. Very grateful.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.